Assalamu alaikum once again, and welcome to the Traveler's Prayer, the podcast that aims to explore the behind-the-scenes tales of some of the most notable Islamic events. And the man behind some of these events, the Mahan behind some of these events, is Rehan Iqbal. Say hello, Rehan.
Assalamu alaikum. What's going on?
I'm good. What has been going on with you?
Seems like forever since we last met.
It has been forever, a long time.
Yeah, and not much has happened since then. Been busy with work. You know how it bees.
I do not understand. I just told you a few weeks ago I was unemployed.
Yeah. So, interesting enough, I reached out to some brothers out in the US who want to do some like media events out in the US now.
Oh,
so that might be happening. Yeah, it might be happening. I don't know about expanding, but spreading our wings, let's say. So that might be happening.
So then on the website, you'll have like UK and America. And two different phone numbers. That's big boy moves, you know. Rehan will go through some of his stories of trials and tribulations when organizing some of these notable Islamic events. And on tonight's episode, is it good to say tonight? Should we just make the daytime or nighttime ambiguous?
Well, I think we make it ambiguous.
Okay.
This morning.
On this day, we cover a tour with one of the greatest speakers out there, I would say. Many of you would have heard of him. His name is Shaykh Omar Suleiman from the USA. This tour, which was back in January 2012, was titled Sand Dunes. And one of the things people may not know is that that was Omar Suleiman's first ever visit to the UK.
It was indeed his first visit, his first tour.
Yeah. Was that after he was banned or before he was banned?
He's not been banned, bro. Don't just like attribute.
Wasn't it him that was banned? Who was banned?
He just mixing up like three different people into one.
Hold up, I'm pretty sure he was banned from coming to the UK.
No, bro. He's not never been banned. He's
who
like
was it then? There was one sheikh.
There's loads of people who've been banned, but he's never been banned.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
No, I'm pretty sure he was banned.
No, bro. He's never been banned. Oh my days.
It was either him or Snoop Dogg. I can't figure it. It was one of those. I can't figure it out.
It was Omar Suleiman or Snoop Dogg. Or was it Mike Tyson?
Yeah.
Somebody from America was banned coming to the UK.
How did you manage to get hold of someone that was once banned from being in the UK?
That is messed up.
No, genuinely, I'm drawing a blank. I don't know if it's him or some other Islamic
Trust
scholar.
me, he's never been banned before.
Okay.
Snoop Dogg.
No, but
if
how did you
Omar's listening to this, I apologize, bro. If this ever gets clipped from like the right-wing media and they're like, this guy's been banned, where's your evidence?
Yeah.
The Traveler's Prayer podcast, they said it. He has never been banned. He's never been close to being banned. He's the nicest guy you'll ever meet. He should never be banned. And he's an amazing speaker.
Naik?
Yes, the guy from India.
Okay.
Who is not Omar Suleiman. I don't think he's banned. I think he's got issues coming in the country. Anyway.
Okay.
Moving away from banned people. Yeah, you know, one's Indian, one's Arab, one's from India, one's from America. But you know, aside from that.
Okay, what's our search for if he got banned or not? Tell me how you even got a hold of him to begin with.
So, as you know, I listen to a lot of like Islamic lectures and stuff.
Yeah.
And I guess around about 2011, 2010, I would spend a lot of time researching online and trying to find scholars from abroad or even UK-based ones who I thought would be suitable for our target audience. You know, the university crowd, young Muslims who are looking for someone who can relay the faith in a language that they can understand. And Omar Suleiman at the time, he was doing a lot of lectures, reminders in Orange County Mosque, I think. And it was on a YouTube channel of theirs. So there's a couple of mosques that he would go to speak to. He was from New Orleans. He was living in New Orleans at the time. And there was a few mosques that had like his lectures up. And he was also invited to, you know, ICNA quite a bit. So this was around about the time where a lot of people started to know who Nouman Ali Khan was. And you would start to see Nouman Ali Khan and Omar Suleiman doing a lot of stuff together. So I listened to a couple of his lectures. You okay?
I drank my water too quickly.
Oh, is that what it is? Or not old age?
No.
Okay. And see a little sympathy I just showed you. Just make sure you stay alive. Damn.
Okay.
We might have to turn the volume down on that afterwards when we listen back to it. So a lot of his stuff, yeah. So he was doing a lot of stuff with Nouman Ali Khan. And I listened to his lectures and I was like, this guy is actually really, really good. And he wasn't... aligned with any organization at the time. He was in New Orleans, and there was a mosque in New Orleans that he was doing speeches. Maybe I saw him on that New Orleans mosque's YouTube channel. I mean, we're talking, 7 years. I can't remember exactly where it was. Definitely on YouTube, I saw some of his lectures, and I was like, this guy's really good. Looks really young as well. And I thought he'd really do a really good job relaying the message of Islam to younger people. And I found his profile on Facebook because at the time he wasn't the big known celebrity sheikh that he is now. There's nothing wrong being a celebrity sheikh. I'm just, for lack of a better word, we'll just use that term. But he just had like a personal page, him and some, friends of his, maybe like 800 odd people he had as friends on Facebook. So I added him on Facebook, and on his Facebook page, he had his email address in his bio somewhere. And I sent him a Facebook message as well. So I think I sent him an email to his inbox and also a message to his Facebook saying, I'm Rayhan, I'm from the UK, I'm trying to do, I do Islamic events, and I wanted to invite you to come out to the UK. Would you be interested? I know you've not been out here before. And I didn't know whether people would turn up to an event with him because, like I said, at that time, he wasn't super well famous. He didn't have, like, for example, 1 million followers on Facebook. He hadn't done stuff, with a lot of high profile people. He hadn't been with Al Maghrib Institute, all these kind of things.
So it was a risk for you.
It wasn't a risk because, like I've always said, it doesn't matter if 1,000 people turn up or 100 people turn up. The content's good and we're putting in some effort, we're going to get rewarded. So the thought I might have had was, well, what if I bring him and nobody wants to host him? And everyone's like, who's he? Never heard of him. That kind of thing. Because that does happen sometimes. Then, trying to sell somebody in to a university and saying he'll be really, really good. And their response is, never heard of him. I don't think people are going to turn up. So I wasn't concerned from my perspective. I was concerned more of, well, what if we go to an Islamic society and they're like, no. But it wasn't a massive concern. Otherwise I would have never reached out to him. It was just like something in the back of my head. Well, what if? So I reached out to him and said, would you be interested in coming to the UK? And he was like, yeah, I'm up for it. And he was really pleasant by email. He's a very soft-natured person. You can tell that through the email discussion that we had. And the communication that we had back and forth. The only problem that we had in the run-up to it was he was moving from New Orleans to Texas. So while we were trying to organize a lot of the stuff, he was in the process of moving. So sometimes there were days where, I'd send an email, I wouldn't hear back for a couple of days, and vice versa. There'll be days where he would email me and I was a little bit out of the loop. So our communication wasn't the smoothest before the tour began, which kind of comes a bit funny later on in the tour. But one of the things as well was, up until that point, I had done, quite a few tours already, as we've discussed on the podcast. And a few people were coming up to me and saying, you seem to be hosting a lot of Al-Maghrib speakers. So we'd had Sheikh Navaid Aziz, we had Sheikh Abdullah Hakim Quick, we had Sheikh Abdul Bari Yahya. And people were, again, how Muslims are, and the Muslim community in the UK is looking for indicators in respects of what I believe and what type of organization we are and where we align ourselves, and are we this, are we that? So people were like, you must be, an Al-Maghrib kind of crew guy, and that's your philosophy and your worldview on the Islamic faith. So when I reached out to Umar, I was like, okay, he's not aligned with anybody, and I invited him to the UK. I think a week after he agreed and I put the promotion material out, Al Maghrib Institute announced, we've got a new sheikh on board, who's Shaykh Omar Suleiman.
No way.
I was like, all those people who were like, we knew he was an Al Maghrib guy. Now we have the evidence. He's got another one. But that was pure coincidence. It just happened.
How did they get ahead of you like that?
They didn't get ahead because I'd emailed him separately. I'm assuming that they, at the same time that I was emailing, they were discussing with him coming on board. But
if you get him, do you think to yourself that I got this guy? Like, no one knows about him. He's a gem hidden away somewhere.
To a degree.
Yeah,
to a degree. It's always nice to... It's a bit tricky. So, for example, when Mufti Flamenca brought him to the UK, again, nobody knew who he was, right? And it's good to be able to liaise with somebody without having to... Once somebody is really busy and they're really popular, they're getting requests left, right, and center. Yeah. And they then have to make a choice between, do I travel first and foremost or not? Or do I stay at home and take care of my family? But then they also have a lot of different organizations reaching out to them. So if I'm reaching out to a sheikh and saying, listen, let's go to a university and we're going to have like 100, 200 people. Well, once somebody is very popular and famous within the Muslim community, there might be the option to do that with Rayhan or go to a conference in another country where there's going to be 10,000 people. someone, again, most Muslim scholars are trying to make the biggest impact, get as many rewards as possible. It's not a difficult choice to choose 10,000 people or 200 people. So it's always nice to find somebody before, because quality is quality. And this is one of the things, like Omar Suleiman was always quality. He was always going to, and I could tell he was always going to be somebody that a lot of people were going to gravitate to and listen to. And same with Mufti Ismail Menk, same with a lot of other people that I've toured with them. Buna, when I first started with him, although he was already semi-popular, I always knew he was going to be, really popular and whatnot. But it's just interesting how the same person, a couple of years later, once they become really popular and lots of people know them, how attendance is just blow up. They just skyrocket and you just have loads of people. And it's the same person in essence.
Yeah.
In the space of 2 years, I mean, the knowledge has increased, but it's not, a massive, significant.
Yeah, the delivery is not different. It's
the same person.
Yeah.
It's the same person. So what happens a lot of the times is, Muslim organizations, attendees are always looking for, is a big name coming to our particular place? But everyone doesn't start off as a big name. Hamza Yusuf didn't start off as being a guy who was talking to 20,000 people at conferences. Zakir Naik wasn't doing, 5, 10,000, 50,000, whatever he does in India, that level of conference. He wasn't doing that when he first started off.
Where did he start off?
Zakir Naik, he was, doing the same thing, I'm assuming, right? He was very much a comparative religion guy.
I thought it was Ahmed Deedat's student, and then he just...
I think that's... I don't know how true that is. From what I know, he kind of took the mantle of Ahmed Deedat's work.
Yeah.
And I think he looks up to him, but I don't know whether he's a direct student or not. But you know what I'm saying? Like, not every speaker starts off being the big name. And a lot of people, they'll only attend something or they'll only be interested in the big names. Yeah. But everyone doesn't start off as a big name. That happens because of the journey that they take and when more people are exposed to them and like what they're talking about. So sometimes you'll go to an event, you have no idea who the person is, but then you're actually taken aback. Like, actually, he's a really good speaker. Like, I was really inspired. I learned something today. And, so if you're listening out there, you see an event that's advertised in your local community or someone says to you that, a sheikh's available to come and do a talk at your university or your mosque or your organization, don't just look at the name and say, well, I've never heard of him, so he mustn't be very good. No, that just means you ain't heard of him. Yeah. Once you will, it might be that he's really, really good. And once you hear him, and a lot of other people hear him, you probably ain't going to be able to, bring him back to your university. So don't always make those judgments based on someone's name value. So yeah, that's how I got in touch with him. It was literally, I heard a few videos of his on YouTube, searched for him on Facebook, found his personal page, added him, sent him a message. Would you come? Yep, I'll come. Cool. That's it.
That's simple.
Simple enough.
Okay. Because he was just telling me before how tall he was. I never knew he was that tall, but me as someone who's just about 6 foot or so, I have difficulties just getting into spaces sometimes. How did he have the same type of difficulties, if not more so?
Yeah, so I hadn't realized that he was a tall dude.
Yeah.
So when Al Maghrib they made a video before they announced that he was joining them.
Yeah.
They made a video and it was like a teaser video. And there was another sheikh from Al Maghrib who came on the video and said, we're going to be announcing a guy very soon. And he gave lots of hints as to who it might be. It was like a guess who the new speaker is going to be type of thing.
Yeah.
And they were dropping loads of hints and tips and suggestions as to who it might be.
Yeah.
And he said, and this guy is really tall, like really tall. And I was like, that can't be Omar Suleiman because he doesn't look that tall on video.
Yeah.
Like I didn't, when you speak to someone, you don't ask them how tall they are, right? And on a video, on a YouTube video, you can't legislate how the height of somebody is.
Because there's no comparison.
There's no comparison. You're just watching a camera and you just see where the head kind of finishes and everyone's head's like in the same position on the camera because it's framed. Well, so I was like, he can't be Omar because he doesn't look that tall. A week later, they were like, it's Omar Suleiman. And I was like, that's strange to say like he's really tall. And I had a Vauxhall Corsa at the time. Vauxhall Corsa, relatively smallish car, right?
Is that hatchback?
I'm not a car person, but I just know it's a small car.
I just threw something out there.
Yeah, like just any kind of car word. It's got a clutch in there. And so isn't that car with the steering wheel?
Yeah. But it's a relatively small car.
It's a relatively small car. And because that's what I needed at the time, right? It was just a little whippersnapper, get around the city and stuff. And so it's a small car anyway. And when he turned up, I was like, he's really tall. So we had to, with his seat, obviously push it back.
Yeah.
And my mate Rahis, if you remember, he was with us on the Strangers tour. I took him along with a couple of events on this particular tour. So Rahis had to sit in the seat behind me because Umar needed the space. And that's something that you don't necessarily, like, I'd never thought of that before in my life. I never thought, what if, because every car I'd had was sufficient and fine for that thing. Like, it's not like he's a giant and, you know, he's like 8 foot or whatever. But just having that, you know, an average, like you, when you sit in my car, you always pull the seat back and you're, what do you say, 6 feet or whatever, right? And I'm guessing he's a little bit taller than that. So you imagine that someone needs that space to be comfortable, especially because we weren't doing from my house to your house journey. We were doing from London to Birmingham, from Birmingham to Sheffield, you know, from Sheffield to this next place, the next place, the next place. We were doing like long distances. So you don't want someone crammed up and feeling like they don't have the space in a vehicle, and because it starts to hurt your legs and your back and all that kind of stuff.
British cars, British like buses are not made for tall people. It's just really uncomfortable. Yeah. My friend has a Corsa and I have to like, I grab onto the roof of the car sometimes to just slide myself out of the car.
Like the Flintstones.
Yeah, just to like leave. So I'm like holding the roof just to like...
Well, he never did that, so we were okay from that perspective. But yeah, I mean, it's just one of those things that you just never... I never... Thinking on it now, I've never even thought of that since that one particular event. Yeah. Probably because I have a bigger car, so I'm always assuming that it's going to not be that bad. But it's just something that I never considered. And you know, when someone's that tall and you're on the road, and UK roads hurt, you know, when you do motorways with the potholes and you're going in cities and stuff like that, our roads are not as wide as the US. So it can really start to hurt someone's limbs and bones and all that kind of stuff. So it was a little bit of a, oh, he's really tall when, you know, I first saw him. And unfortunately, the first time I saw him was when he landed in the country, so I couldn't do much about that. So sorry, Umar, for putting you in a tiny car.
Did he complain much, or was he kept up with it?
No, he kept up with it. On one of the days, what happened was his leg had really started to hurt.
From what?
We suspected it was from, you know, the cramped space in the car.
Oh, okay.
So his leg really started to hurt, and we went to a hospital in London. And it's really funny. We went to the hospital, and I said, look, here in England, like it's NHS, right? You can go into a hospital, and they'll check you out. I think it was like Thursday night or whatever. And I said, look, if they say anything, because we were relatively similar age-ish. And I said, look, give my details.
You're Omar Suleiman's age?
Relatively, like we're close enough in age.
Oh, wow.
So I said, give my age. Plus they're not going to look at his, you know, they're not going to ask for identification. Like they're just going to say, what's your name? So I was like, look, we'll write my name on the paper and we'll put all my details and you go in. And then we sat there and we're waiting for like maybe half an hour, 45 minutes. And this is how nice of a guy is. He keeps like apologizing to me. He's like, I know you're really tired and you want to get back to Birmingham and I'm sorry for holding you here and X, Y, and Z. And I was like, no, you know, it's fine, it's fine. Maybe I have that face that always looks concerned or worried. I was cool with it because I was like, look, we've got another 2 days with you. I want to make sure that you're fine. And also I don't want to send you back to the US with some health condition that you picked up on the road. And that'll be like my...
He's limping coming back to the US. And what happened? UK is a rough place, you know.
I'll always be known as the guy who damaged him. Yeah. Send him back as damaged goods. So we were in the hospital and we were there for like 45 minutes, an hour. And then something just said to both me and him at the same time, like, what if they start asking us too many questions? And they're asking like, oh, where's your accent from? And all this, that, and the other. And I said, well, what if that happens and they do check you and then we do, both of us probably said it to each other, and they end up giving him like a £5,000, you know, bill. Like, oh, we checked you out on, and we didn't know how the NHS works. So I'm not like in that space, right? So I was like, oh, imagine if they do that. But luckily, because I was a student myself and I'd, you know, been through the system so much, I had a few student doctors on like my phone, contact list. So I called a couple of them up and I was like, listen, I've got a friend of mine. He's from the US. He's getting some pain in his legs, and Omar has some in his family. He had some conditions, like I think someone in his family would get blood clots sometimes. So he said, look, I think I might be getting blood clots in my leg. That's why we stopped. So I phoned my friend and he just did some tests over the phone. How's your leg looking? Can you do this? Can you do that? Can you do this? Can you do that? He was like, yeah, you haven't got blood clots. You probably just got cramp because this car was small. And I was like, oh snap. That's like, that's probably no. But I told my mate, like, look, we got Corsa. He's a relatively tall dude, And I think that's what's caused it. My mate was like, it's probably that. Just walk around for a little bit. You should be fine. We were okay. But yeah, man, you know, again, these things that you just don't anticipate. And all that was going through my mind was, imagine if he's got like a serious, you know, if he actually does have blood clots or something, and it's because of me and because of my, you know, crappy car.
I just imagine the protocol going onwards. It's like you asking speakers how tall they are, and they're renting cars.
I was tempted to ask that. I mean, the thing is, it wasn't the last day. If it was the last day, it probably would have hung on me a bit more. But because more things happened during the tour, kind of forgot about it a little bit. And I've never done it since. But generally now, if I see someone on video and I think it looks a little bit tall, I'll probably won't ask them directly. I might ask someone else who knows them and say, listen, is he a tall dude? Because I'm always a bit tall. But there you go. There's a little story from height related.
Always be concerned for tall people. We need to have infrastructure around us as well, like the right type of things. The tour itself was called Sand Dunes. What was the naming behind this? Where did the inspiration come from?
It's kind of random, the name. And you know how previously we talked about, I like to do a lot of events that have a theme, a consistent theme, and every lecture is related to that title, and each individual one is telling a story in of itself, and it all encapsulated as you look at it as a whole. All the lectures kind of make sense. And for this one, I was like, well, I don't necessarily have to do that all the time. There's nothing, again, there's nowhere written down that like media has to always, every tour has to make sense from a logistical perspective, and also every individual lecture has to relate to the other one somewhere, and it also has to relate to the title. I just thought, why don't I just do completely random topics, just interesting topics? And if we're going to do random ones, I was like, well, why don't I just pick a random title as well? And I was sitting there thinking, okay, what kind of signifies randomness? And I thought, well, you know, the sand dunes in the Arab world, they're all kind of random. Like they go up and down. Some are wavy, some are different heights. And I was like, that kind of looks a bit random. And it looks relatively Islamic because obviously you see sand dunes in the desert, and you know, the Arabian lands is very much deserty. And again, I was thinking about it from a visual perspective. That would look really cool on the poster. And the poster does kind of look pretty cool even today. And I thought, well, sand dunes is random. And it's a random title anyway. But people kind of know what sand dunes are. But still, they won't know how that relates to this. So why don't we do that? So every individual lecture, you understand what the topic is through the name, but it's just random. It's
not directly tied to the overall title.
Exactly.
Okay, that's cool.
So that's where the name just came from. Yeah, I just sat there and thought, oh, what's random? Sand dunes is a bit random. Kind of might look cool on a poster. Yeah, let's go with sand dunes. And that's where the name came from.
So the poster, how did it look?
Google it, bro. Looks so big, if you ask me.
Huh?
Have you not seen it? I'll show you now.
I think I've seen it.
For the purposes of those people who are listening to the podcast.
2012. 7 years ago. No, I don't remember it. How would I remember it?
You were a young blood then. You were not...
I was 19. No, 20. Oh, okay. Yeah. I like it. There's blood in the back and everything. Sand dunes.
Sand dunes.
Okay.
So that's where that name came from.
So, okay.
Randomness on top of randomness.
Yeah. Did you make the poster?
No, the brother who designed our logo and designed and developed our website.
Yeah.
He did the poster. He was doing a lot of posters for us at the time. So he made that one. But I just... Again, because I don't like to be pigeonholed into certain things, I didn't want there to be like every like media tour, there's something that you can pick out and say, oh yeah, I know the formula. Just, you know.
Change it up,
man. Every time people think they know the answers, we change the questions.
Yeah. So hold up, I'm curious. With the poster situation, did you always have one guy doing it? When did it change up?
Initially, yeah.
Okay.
Initially, unless he turned around and said, I don't have the time right now, because of course he's got his own things going on in his life, different priorities, and at certain times he would just say, look, I'm not able to do it. If there was someone I'd seen on the Islamic scene who I thought that guy's created something pretty cool, because I have an eye for that kind of thing, I would try to identify, who made that one? And people would say this person, and I would generally have an in with them. I was connected to somebody who might have been connected to somebody, you know, that whole 6 degrees of separation thing. So there was an odd couple of posters here and there where I would ask other people to do it. But generally, you know, this friend of mine, may God reward him, he put a lot of effort in. You know, even when I was at Birmingham ISOC in the Islamic Society there, he did a lot of posters for us there. So he helped me with posters there. He would sometimes even, he wasn't even a student at Birmingham University. He'd turn up. We used to have a display cabinet outside of the prayer room. You know, the ones that are on the wall where people put notifications on. He used to come and bring papers, sheets of paper, make like a canvas out of it and draw something that was Islamic, that would be a nice visual aid, but would tell a story about what the Islamic Society was doing.
That's cool.
So yeah, he would do that. And then
But he wasn't part of the university.
he wasn't part of it. He's just a friend of mine. And he would just come and I would just ask him, like, can you do this and that for us? And he used to enjoy it because it was creative and he was a creative person. And it was like an outlet for him to use his creativity. And he liked some of the ideas that I would come up with. And he thought, yeah, me and you can mesh together quite well. And then when I made Like Media, like I said, the original logo, the Red Sea one that we were messing around with for so long, he made a whole bunch of logos for that for me. He did the original Like Media logo, the website, all the posters. And I think I only moved away from asking him to do the posters maybe about 17, 18 tours in.
Well, he wasn't cutting it.
No, he just probably had other priorities and he was like, look, I can't. Because the thing with me is, and I think this is a lot of people who, you know, try to pretend that they're creative. I would get him to design something and say, it's really good, but move this down a little bit, move that up a little bit, change that around a little bit. And there was so many back and forths on like little marginal gains that probably for him, it was a bit frustrating. Like, okay, no one's going to notice this except you. But I was like, yeah, but it's like 0.23 millimeters out of the sink. And so it would end up taking a lot of time if it's, and you know, once you got a job and whatnot.
Have you stopped doing that?
No, God.
I've had clients like you that are in tune to a degree where it's almost as if they're doing it. And then they obsessing about it, but then you think to yourself, it's not worth it.
I've got better at it.
Yeah.
I've got better at it because I know and I've seen, because of my background in marketing now, I know that I've done it for so long that I know when I'm improving something that I'm the only one who notices. Yeah, exactly. So there's been times when I've said to someone, oh, do you see how that looks like that? And they're like, I don't know what you're talking about. And I have to literally point it out. And they were like, oh, until you pointed it out, I didn't even notice.
I had a guy who is in the same field as me. He asked me to do something. I did it. Then he wanted it changed specifically to what he wanted. He changed it in such a long way, like almost an hour, and he ended up changing it back to what I initially did.
Yeah.
So it just
that happens a lot of creatives.
A lot of the times. But then moving on to the first event of the tour, that was called Holding Hot Coals. This seems somewhat tied to sand dunes. People cook and stuff in the desert.
Yeah, it's also based on a hadith of, and I'm going to paraphrase that. At a certain point, the religion is going to be so difficult that it's going to be like holding onto hot coals. Yeah. So, you know, it was Islamically rooted in a hadith. And so we were like, that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where the title came from.
And this first event was held at Hertfordshire University.
Hertfordshire University.
English is not my first language. Hertfordshire University. It sounds posh. Is it a posh place?
It's near Luton.
Oh, they're not posh.
Well, it's in a part of the country that's also Hatfield as well, which is, I guess, it's relatively posh. So what happened was, in terms of that particular event, we'd booked ourselves for the Thursday in Kingston University. We'll come to that lecture later on in the podcast. But the brother who was at Kingston, he was good friends with the ISAC president at Hertfordshire University.
Yeah.
So the Hertfordshire brother was like, oh, you guys are getting... He contacted me. He said, I've heard from Ibrahim that you guys are doing a tour with Shaykh Omar Suleiman. Please bring me into our university. And Hertfordshire is really close to Heathrow Airport. So because Omar was landing at Heathrow Airport, I was like, oh, well, what we can do is we can, you know, from Heathrow, it's really close to Hertfordshire University. So that's how we kind of ended up there. So the brother himself got in touch and he was like, I know who Omar Suleiman is and he'll be really, really good for my university. But what was interesting talking about Heathrow on that first day, on that particular day, was me and Rahis were going to go pick Omar up. And when you're going to go pick somebody up from the airport, you know, every once in a while there'll be an incident on the motorway. I think his flight was arriving at like 7:40. Let's just say for argument's sake, 7:40 a.m. And we would leave like an hour and a half before from Birmingham to get to Heathrow Airport because of course someone's going through luggage and all that kind of stuff and they're going to be asking him questions. And you know, Heathrow from my house is like maybe an hour and 20. So by the time everything happens of him going through and getting his luggage and all that kind of stuff, you generally 9 times out of 10 you're there on time. And every once in a while there'll be an incident on the motorway. Car might be broken down, someone's been in a crash, and that delays you a little bit. And even with one incident on the motorway, or there might be roadworks, even if there's one incident,
You can still make it.
you'll still make it. Now this was a very unique incident or time when there was 4 incidents on the way. So there were 4 car crashes on the way from Birmingham to Heathrow.
Yeah.
Not only that, Umar's flight came in 20 minutes early.
Unheard of.
Unheard of, right?
The perfect storm.
So, and literally that had never happened to me before. No speaker had ever been early.
Yeah.
Everyone was always running late. So me and Reese, we're chilling out. We're like, what can you do? Do you know what I mean? I get annoyed sometimes. I think we were speaking about this before. I get annoyed when there's something that's my fault and I'm out of time. I'm either late or I've missed something or I've made an error and it's my fault.
Yeah.
Like I should have seen and I should have anticipated that. But when things are not my fault, then because I know I can't do anything about it, it was God's plan, right?
Yeah.
That was going to happen. So I'm like, well, I can't do anything about it. So we're just chilling. We're just driving along the motorway. And all of a sudden, I get a text message from Sheikh Navaid Aziz. Now, if you remember, Sheikh Navaid was on the Strangers Tour
Yeah.
a couple of months before in October. And I get a message from him. And he goes, oh, where are you? Because Umar's arrived at the airport. And you guys are not there. We're like, oh, we're half an hour away. And Rahis was replying back. And he said, look, he's there, he's waiting. And he doesn't have a UK phone number because he'd never been to the UK. So he didn't have a UK phone number. Now, unknown to me. So Umar comes out of the airport, got his luggage early. Everything that from his side of things, the flight was early and his luggage was straight away. So he comes out and he's looking around. There's nobody there. He doesn't have a UK phone. You know, this was the days before WhatsApp and whatnot. So he had no way of connecting to us, and he thought, what if something's happened to these guys on the way? And what he did was he asked someone to borrow their phone, or, you know, no, he went to like WH Smith inside and asked to buy a SIM card, but he wanted them to put data on there. So he went on Facebook, you know, when you have an event page.
Yeah.
So he went onto the event page because, again, there's nobody there. Like, I'm not there. Race is not there. He's got no way of contacting us. So I think he sent me an email. But obviously, I was driving, so I wasn't checking my emails. And then he put on the Facebook event page, this is Omar Suleiman. If anyone knows where Rehan is, can you tell him that I'm waiting for him in the airport? And you know, on your feed on Facebook, Sheikh Navaid has seen the feed at the time, and so Sheikh Navaid had replied to him and said, oh, what's going on? He's like, look, I'm at the airport, nobody here. Sheikh Navaid's like, look, give me a second, I'll speak to him. So he ended up being like the go-between for both of us. So he was asking us what was going on. Then he was relaying it to Umar and all this, that and the other. And he was like, look, go get him, be there quick. And then he was like, oh, tell Rahis that I said salam. I was like, and then Rahis was like, it's me, bro, I'm the one who's texting back. And he was like, oh, pad thai. He was like, pad thai. So we cracked up about that, and we got there, and I was really apologetic, but to Umar, and I was like, oh, so he was like, Umar was like, when I got him, he was like, look, go to the event page, delete all the messages that were on there, because he didn't know any other way of like getting in touch with them.
And
he's like, it doesn't look good. He goes, it doesn't look good if that's there, because, you know, people don't know the backstory of it all. They don't know that there was 4 crashes on the motorway. They're just looking and seeing, you know, me putting all these messages. And
that'd be good, like a background story before, you know, the lecture begins, so that people who did say they're gonna go onto the event can sort of interact and understand, oh, that's why he.
They're probably thinking like we really messed up and we dropped the ball on him. But so he was like, yeah, you know what, bro, it's not gonna look good. Just go in and delete it. And I was like, yeah, don't worry. It's not happened before. This hasn't, right? That we've been late on a couple of occasions, but not like massively late. This was like half an hour, 40 minutes or whatever it was. And from his own pocket, he had to go buy the SIM card and all that. So that wasn't really the nicest way to start things off. But we took him to my sister's house, whose house is in Slough, got him some rest there, got him some food. And then we went to the event. And interesting enough, Umar was like holding hot coals. He said, oh, I don't know who picked this topic, but this is actually my favorite topic that I like to speak on the most. And I didn't know that it was his favorite topic. I just picked, you know, a topic that I thought sounded pretty cool. I think if you watch the video of holding hot coals, he even says it in there. He says, oh, I don't know who picked this topic, but it's one of my favorite, it is my favorite topic, full stop. And another thing that I remember from that particular event is I used to before record the entire lecture.
Yeah.
And at every event, I'd always record the Q&A. But very rarely I would share the Q&A. I always thought one day I'll save it for something, make like a little project or a little side playlist where we save previously unseen footage, the Q&A from this particular event. And so we did a Q&A at this event. And don't forget, this is almost first time to the UK. And you know how people are when they write letters, they write questions on a piece of paper and they pass it forward. So Umar reads the first question and he looks at me and he goes, man, the UK, man. And like he folds it in half and he, lifts it up the paper and he says, whoever wrote this letter, this question, come see me afterwards. But he was like, now I know why people talk about the UK, man. Phew. So we did the rest of the Q&A and I was like, what happened? Like, what was the question? And he goes, some guy had written on there, my father is a deviant, astray, and he mentioned the sect that his father was going on.
Yeah.
And, how can I give dawah to my dad who is taking himself and my entire family to the hellfire? And it was like, whoa, bro, this is my first day in the UK.
Yeah.
The first question I get is this, and he's looking at me.
For you.
He's looking at me like, is this for real?
That's
it. Looking around probably for candid camera or something, saying, is this legit?
America has gang wars. We have sect wars. That's it.
So from that day, I was like, I'm not recording Q&As, man. You can't control what the audience is saying or what they're.
Yeah, there was an Islamic event where they had a Q&A in public and everything. And it was to a sheikh that debates a lot of the times with like different sects and things like that. And he must have lost the debate in the past. And this was a totally different event. It wasn't about debates. It was just about, reminders and inspiration. The first question he's got was, how do you feel embarrassing Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'at with your previous debate? Answer for your mistakes because you have embarrassed us. Like, it was such a direct question. Everyone was like, what is this? Yeah, we all about that beef when it comes to Islam in the UK. Yeah.
And from Umar, I think that day he was like, what have I landed myself into, man? This guy turns up 40 minutes late. I rock up to this university and the guys asked me about, he said like, my father's a innovating, shirk associating, deviant. Like he came out with all the little, all the little labels. And Umar, when I said to him like, okay, we're leaving my sister's house in Slough, we're going to go to Birmingham, we're going to put you in a hotel. And he was like, looked at me and he goes, it's going to be a shady hotel, isn't it? I was like, no, bro, it's going to be a normal hotel. He was like, okay, fair enough. But I think like that day he was probably thought to himself internally like, man, what have I got myself into?
What is this place?
What is going on, man? Like what they sold me is not what's actually happening. So it was just an interesting first. I remember that the guy who was the Hertfordshire ISAC president, he was like, I can't believe you're bringing Omar Suleiman. Like he really, 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 really knew who he was. And I think there was maybe like 60, 70, 80 people at the event. But for Hertford University, that was a really good crowd. So they were really chuffed. They were like, it's really good attendance, turnout, mashallah, it's really good. And, for the part of the country that they're in, for them, it was a great turnout. So in a nutshell, that's how the first event went. Lots of little funny little things that, if you look at it from a specific perspective, went a little bit wrong.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, the lecture itself was really good. Even if you watch the video, the lighting in the room was really bad. So I didn't have a very good camera at the time that could adjust to bad lighting. So if you watch the video, because it had an autofocus on the camera.
Oh, that's actually brand new.
Yeah. So I mean, the technology on the camera was really good for 2012. But the problem was because the room was so dark, it would keep focusing in on him and then focusing out.
Yeah.
So it was trying to fix the focus. So when I'm watching on the little, the flip out screen, you would see it get really blurry because it's trying to refocus. So while it's focusing, it's getting blurry, and it was really frustrating me.
You didn't have the right lens.
No, but it was like a camcorder. It wasn't the SLR type where you put a lens on the front. It was just a normal camcorder, but it had autofocus, and they were selling it as like a really big thing. Like this camera's got autofocus. So that's why I brought it, because I thought some places we have dark rooms, but I didn't realize that autofocus, what it does is every single time he moves, and because there was a screen behind him that had light on, the lighting would change, so you'd have to refocus again. You hear it going, and I was like, no,
Yeah.
I can't see what's going on.
Yeah.
So I had to quickly turn the autofocus on. So if anyone watches that video and you're thinking what's going on with the footage, it was the goddamn autofocus on the camera.
And this is after the 11:11.
Yeah, so the 11:11, because we had our professional,
Yeah, exactly.
professional camera crew, but we couldn't afford to bring a professional camera crew on board with us for like 5 days. This was the time where we hosted Omar Suleiman and we had him for 5 days, but this was the days before, people used to have fundraisers at events.
Yeah.
To bring, and it was a free event. Anyone could just turn up and just listen to the lecture. So we number one, we're paying all the costs associated with having an international speaker, and then on top of that, we can't afford to pay
That makes sense.
professional camera crew, for every single event. So yeah, at that stage it was just me and my camcorder.
Okay, moving on to the second event, which was on a Wednesday, and I think, if I remember correctly from uni days, Wednesday was like a half day for my uni and most other unis, and you had 2 events on this day, back to back. The first one was at Wolverhampton, titled Art of Forgiveness. Why did you do the forgiveness part? Like, why was this?
Again, it was a topic that we hadn't discussed before.
Yeah.
So
it's brand new. You haven't really.
Yeah, like me, I hadn't really had a lecture that was full on forgiveness. So I didn't just want to call it forgiveness. I thought art of forgiveness kind of sounds a bit interesting. Maybe I saw art of something somewhere and that inspired me to do that. So that's where the topic came. I just thought, we've never done it before. This is a random event where we can have anything and anything goes. So we just picked up that lecture title.
Okay, that's cool. How was the event? Now, it was the second day in the UK, connecting with the English audience.
Yeah.
Was it better this time around?
I remember 2 things. So one of the things I almost struggled with when he first landed in the UK, and I guess it was probably because he spent so much time moving house from New Orleans to Texas.
Yeah.
He couldn't get aligned again with the UK timing. So, for example, I would go to sleep at midnight, knowing I've got the tour in the morning. He was still on US time. So his body clock at that time at midnight was like, it's, this is like 4 5 a.m. So 4 5 p.m. Like, you don't go to sleep at 4 5 p.m. You stay awake.
Yeah.
So he just couldn't get to sleep. And I met him the next day just before I was picking him up to get to Wolves. And he said, look, I couldn't get to sleep originally. And I was awake for so long that I thought, I might as well just wait till Fajr time, pray Fajr, and then I'll go to sleep. So he ended up only with like 2-3 hours sleep. So he was really, really tired. And I was wide awake. I was fresh. I was like, yeah, man, I got good, 6 hours sleep or whatever it was, 8 hours sleep. And he was really struggling. He was like, I'm really tired. All the way to Wolverhampton, he was like, he was really struggling with it, really tired. As soon as we got into the venue and as soon as he got on the stage and he started speaking, his tiredness just lifted. Like, it just evaporated. He wasn't tired. He wasn't hungry. He wasn't any of those things. And afterwards I said to him, I thought you said you were really tired. And he goes, I was. But as soon as I started speaking to the audience and interacting with the crowd and whatnot, that's just amazing how, I remember watching a wrestling documentary and they used to say the same thing about some wrestlers, that because it had so little sleep in between going from city to city to city, as soon as they see, an audience and fans, they would the adrenaline would just lift them. And I think that's kind of what happened to Umar. Like, he was so tired. As soon as he got into the lecture, because he was speaking about something that he was really invested in and he really believes in, and it's an Islamic project and lecture that he's speaking on, that the adrenaline must have just done the same thing and taken over him, and he just powered straight through, and he was wide awake after that. After that, he was like, bro, I could go for like another 15, 16 hours. I'm ready now. Like, just really, I've seen that with a lot of speakers who are really tired at the beginning, and then they'll get involved with whatever the event is. They're like, now I'm wide awake.
That's strange.
Something just lifts in them. Maybe
they feed off the life energy of the audience.
I mean, it is the UK, so there's not going to be that much life energy. But I guess, when you're so passionate about something and you're describing and you're talking about it, and, you're the lead guy that everyone's listening to and is paying attention to, then again, it must be that adrenaline thing, and it just takes you through. And then once you're at that stage, because then obviously after the lecture we go eat and stuff, then you're just ready. You're wide awake. Then the tiredness lifts, and that sometimes happens as well. If you wake up after a couple of hours, your next couple of hours you're a bit drowsy, but once you power through that drowsy period, you're like, all right, now my body's fully awake. But I always found that kind of cool. And because we were going to Sheffield, Wolverhampton University, there's like a really, really tiny prayer room on their campus. But we spoke to the guys and said, look, we're going to Sheffield. And they said, look, rather than go pray in this very tiny room where there's space for like 2-3 people only, there's a mosque around the corner. And that mosque is on the way to the motorway.
Yeah.
Go to that mosque called Wolverhampton Central Mosque, I think. Right near Wolverhampton Wanderers Football Club. So they were like just down the road, a couple of minutes away. We're like, all right, cool. So we rolled into the mosque. Very nice mosque. Almost looks kind of American. If you know, the way that they've got the whole setup thing going on. So we walked into the mosque and we prayed. And randomly, there's another uncle in there praying. This is what, like, I would say 3:30. So there's an uncle who's praying. And you normally go in the mosque and nobody says anything to you. Everyone just leaves you to yourself, right? So me and Omar are praying. And the uncle just decides to walk over. And he goes, starts talking to me first because I'd finished praying first. And he said, oh, you know, young man, where are you from? I said, oh, I'm from Birmingham. And I am assuming maybe he's part of the mosque and he wanted to get me involved in the mosque or whatever. So he probably saw a couple of young guys and thought... Recruitment. Or either that or he's probably just wanting to have a chin wag. I don't know what his intentions were. But he just come over. And that very rarely happens. You've been to mosques, right?
Yeah.
Like people just leave you to it. And they just like might smile at you and say salam and that's about it. So he comes over and starts having a conversation. I go, oh... He goes, what are you doing here? I said, oh, a friend of mine's come from abroad. And... we needed a place to pray. So at this point, Umar comes over and sees us talking. And the uncle, you know, continuing his chit chat, says to Umar, where are you from? Now, Umar actually is from New Orleans, but he had just moved to Texas. Now, Umar thought, I'll say to the uncle, when the uncle said to him, where are you from? I'll say Texas, because nobody's heard of New Orleans. Nobody knows what New Orleans is. And the uncle goes, oh, you're from Texas. I don't actually know Texas. I don't know anyone from Texas. But a friend of mine is from New Orleans. And Umar was like, yeah, I'm actually from New Orleans. I've just moved to Texas. And the uncle was like, about. You know what I mean? He just said that just because I said New Orleans. Right? So the uncle was like really not convinced that he was actually from New Orleans. And the uncle's like, yeah, because there's a mosque there. And he named the mosque's name. And he goes, there's a mosque there. My friend who's a Malana there. And his name is this. And Umar was like, yeah. I know the guy. He comes to my mosque a lot. And we work a lot together and stuff. And the uncle's just looking at us like, yeah, you guys are just saying this, right? Just like make me feel good. And then Umar starts telling him about all the stuff that he's doing in New Orleans. The uncle's like, yeah, you know, I know this person there. And Umar's like, yeah, I know that person. And he's like, yeah, I know this person. And they're both like doing all this, right? And then the uncle's like, okay, it's nice to speak to you. Enjoy your journey for the rest of the day. And I said to Umar, how surreal is it that we landed in a mosque in Wolverhampton?
Yeah.
And an uncle walked up to us. And you told him you're from Texas. And then he ends up going, I don't know Texas, but I know this other place called New Orleans, which is actually where you're from. Yeah. And starts naming all the mosques that he's been to in New Orleans and naming you all the people that you know. And just is kind of like, yeah, I know all the same people. Like,
is
what is the chances? Who?
The uncle.
No, I think maybe he's got relatives or something in New Orleans. So it was just like I mean, if you saw the uncle, it wasn't like an uncle that you would assume was going to walk up to you and start getting you involved in stuff. He just looked like an uncle. And so I'm assuming...
Just a guy about his business.
Yeah, just going about his business. So I'm assuming he just wanted to have some small talk and just chat to us. But it was just surreal, man. Like in Wolverhampton, you find a guy who's been to New Orleans. You know, I've had so many people from the US. Only Omar is the only one who's been, you know, is from New Orleans. Yeah. Right? So what is a coincidence? What are the chances that one time that we go to that one mosque, there's an uncle who's been to the same part of the US and knows all the same people? And despite the fact, you know, if you say to 9 out of 10 Muslims in the UK, have you heard of New Orleans? They'll probably say no. You say to 9 out of 10, have you heard of Texas? They'll say yes.
Yeah.
This was the one occasion where the guy was like, I don't know Texas, but I know New Orleans. So me and Omar on the way, I was like, dude, that was crazy. He was like, that kind of was crazy, innit?
Yeah. Okay. You had a moment there with random uncle.
Random uncle, man. That's especially because Omar was like, I just didn't think he was going to know New Orleans. And actually, he did.
The second event of the same day, which is more or less the third event, was at Sheffield Hallam University. Did you abandon Sheffield University after the terrible fundraising?
We got that offended that we were like, never again. No, Sheffield Hallam was... it was the only spot actually in the north that we did an event on the tour. So we did a couple in the Midlands, I think. We did a couple down south in London, and Sheffield Hallam was the only one that we did in the north. And that proved a little bit controversial because originally the plan was that Umar was going to stay till the Saturday.
Yeah.
So Omar was going to stay, and we were going to do events on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. And then Umar said to me, I need to get back to the US for an organization I volunteered and I'm a part of. They have a big meeting on the Saturday. So can I get back to the US on Saturday? But the original plan for the Saturday was to go to a mosque in Manchester, Disbury Mosque. And they originally were like, yeah, you know, sounds like a good event. We've worked with you in the past. We're happy to host. But as soon as we turned around and he said, look, I need to do an event in Manchester. Sorry, I need to go back for a meeting in the US. I had to tell the mosque, look, we can't do Saturdays, any other day that you can do. And they were like, no, there's no other day because we don't have space in the itinerary or in our diary to do something during the weekdays. We can only really do it on the weekend. So that stopped that. Reached out to a couple of ISOCs in Manchester and said, look, do you guys want to pick anything up? And they were like, our schedule again at the time, we're too busy. We've got too many things going on. We can't do anything. So we really wanted to take him to Manchester. And then when Manchester didn't work out, we went to Sheffield Hallam. But I remember there was a sister on the Facebook page after we announced it who was like, put a message on there saying, why is this not happening in Manchester? We want this to happen in Manchester. And can I speak to whoever's organizing this, asking why they haven't organized it in Manchester? So I just replied back saying, we tried to do Manchester and it just didn't happen. Maybe next time, just like a standard kind of response. And she was like, no, next time. Have you exhausted every single option to bring him to Manchester? We really want him specifically to come to Manchester.
That's an adamant sister.
Yeah, she was proper adamant. And I was like, I just blanked it after that. I remember Umar, I just like, what am I supposed to say now? Right? Like, I can't do much about this.
Exhaust every opportunity, man.
Yeah.
Make it happen.
I was like, sorry, man, it don't work like that.
Yeah.
So once the tour's announced, the tour's announced. So we went to Sheffield Hallam instead because I knew the guys there. And the Hallam guys, again, they were like, Rayhan, if you say he's they didn't really know him at the time. They were like, if you're saying he's a good speaker, we'll happily put it on. And we'll happily go ahead with it. I remember the brother who's the ISAC president at the time, Nizar, one of the better ISAC presidents I've seen over the years at any university, to be fair. Really good dude. He was like, yeah, okay, we've worked with you guys before. He's if you say he's good, he's good. So we went to Sheffield Hallam, and I remember a brother came because the sister who made the comment on Facebook, she had like a pseudonym. It wasn't her real name. It was like something.
Yeah.
Right. So when we turned up, this one brother came to Umar at the end when we were doing the Q&A and was like, oh, I came all the way from Manchester to listen to you because I saw the event and I realized it wasn't in Manchester. I came all the way from Manchester, and I was like to Umar, I was like, oh, do you think he's the sister who's been commenting on the thing? Do you think he's the person who's been commenting on it? Because Umar had seen the thread of like the sister saying come to think, and he didn't get the joke because I was just trying to be funny. Like I obviously knew it was a girl who'd written the comment, and then he was a guy saying I come from Manchester. I was like, he must be the one who's commenting with his fake pseudonym. And Umar was like proper serious. He was like, no, bro, that was a sister. This is a guy. I'm like, no, okay, clearly my British humor didn't work on the American. And I remember the lecture was packed, man. So the president at the time probably didn't know who he was, but a lot of people in Sheffield knew who he was. And it was, again, one of the rare, I think it was the only one on that event where the entire room was packed top to bottom.
Yeah.
There was no space to move. And I remember they had you can watch it in the video when you watch back. Because this was called Laws of Love. This topic was.
Ooh, that's romantic.
Yeah, so it was like a romantic-y kind of thing. And the ISOC, they made like this really funny presentation at the beginning to kind of introduce the event. And they had this funny slide where there was a guy and he had a sign around his neck that basically made it look like he was owned by his wife. And it was really funny at the time.
Yeah.
And I remember Umar, when he started off his lecture, he tried referencing it, but they'd removed that still from the screen. So it took them like 5 minutes to bring it back up, and Umar was like, yeah, by now the joke's gone, bro. Like, yeah,
it's gone.
It's done. It's not funny anymore now that I've had to. I remember that. And I just remember, it was really, really, really packed out. Sheffield Hallam is always a great space, and we went out with the guys afterwards. I really enjoyed the lecture. And the thing with the Sheffield Hallam crew at that time, they were just like, the committee, the boys anyway, they were like just the boys, you know how you have that camaraderie between people. They were just like that. They were like, we're the gang, man. This is our team. These are boys. And that really came across in Sheffield. So yeah, I just remember it was meant to be in Manchester. And, there was meant to be a couple of events in the north, one in Manchester. And then we end up with the Sheffield Hallam one. And I just remember the place was completely packed out. And it was a really good event. and that's the one of the videos that we've extracted a little bit from, because Umar tells a really good story in there about love, and we extracted that clip from the larger lecture. I made like a short video with Umar talking about love there, and that's done really well online. So yeah, that was like the third day.
Third day.
Sorry, second day.
Third event.
Yeah. Sorry, people, for confusing you all.
Yeah. Don't do that again.
Sorry.
But on the actual third day, you were back in London.
London town.
Kingston University for a lecture called Aspiring for Excellence, which is a pretty straightforward title, but just tell us a bit about that. What was the lecture details about?
Well, the lecture details are pretty much what it is. It's a motivational talk and about getting Muslims to aspire to excellence. And it's pretty much...
In every which way.
In every which way.
Yeah.
It's exactly what it says on the tin. But I remember a lot of stuff from Manchester, from this particular day in London, man. This day was hectic. So this was the day where Umar was thinking that he had blood clots in his legs. You know, this was where he was really feeling the pain in his legs. So, but before, we were rolling into London, and, you know, it's his first time coming to the UK, and we were mega early for the lecture. So we're looking at the sat-nav, and the sat-nav says, you're 30 minutes away from your destination. We've got like 3 hours before the lecture.
Yeah.
And I said to him, oh, you know what? We've got 3 hours. Is there anywhere that you want to see in London that is like a bucket list thing? Do you want to see Big Ben? Do you want to see Buckingham Palace? Do you want to see whatever else, you know, the London Wheel or whatever the major attractions are that Americans kind of are interested in? And he goes, have we got time? I'm like, yeah, dude, we've got 3 hours and there's, you know, 30 minutes to like the destination. And he was like, okay, in London. But this is the thing, in London. So he was like, okay, cool. If you think we got enough time. We drove probably for like another 5 minutes. So I said, you know, 25 minutes to your destination. And we sat there for an hour and 45 minutes. We did not move at all.
That's like a rookie mistake on your part.
Same spot in the same place, did not move. So all of a sudden, the sat-nav saying, oh, the destination now is still 25 minutes away. And Buckingham Palace or whatever it was that we were going to go was like now saying it's 40 minutes away. So he said, look, if we try to go there and we get stuck in traffic, forget being 3 hours early, we're going to be mega late. And I even remember, because, you know, we were traveling so we could have combined, but it was so tight to Maghrib time that we just had to pull the car up in a service station and just pray in a service station. Because if we hadn't stopped and we just drove to the lecture theatre, and we'd taken that time into consideration before, that's why we left so early, because we were like, oh, we can go into, you know, we'll have time to pray and we can join and whatnot. All of a sudden we were like rushing against time to just pray, you know, Dhuhr and Asr before Maghrib kicks in. So he was like, no way. And he was adamant. He was like, no way am I going to go to do a lecture about excellence and aspiring for excellence, and me and you have just missed 2 prayers because, you know, we tried to see Buckingham Palace. And I was like, okay, bro, we'll pull up in the service station and we'll pray. So we turned the car around and we went to the university and we did the lecture there. We made it on time.
Alhamdulillah.
We made it on time. But if we'd stuck and sat there waiting to go to Buckingham Palace or wherever it was, we were no way.
Yeah.
And it was
if you're driving, you're messed up. But if you weren't and you were just catching the tube and that, you'd been fine.
Yeah, exactly. So we would have been fine from that perspective. But you know, just it's such a surreal thing to sit here and describe. But sitting there for an hour and a half and not moving, and we weren't like, this wasn't central London.
Yeah.
This was coming into London, and it was just, what we had to do was, if you kept on that straight path, we were going to be stuck there forever. So we had to do a U-turn and go to Kingston University. And it was all just me trying to be a little bit like, yeah, we've got some time. Let's look at a couple of things before we head out. So we ended up at the university, did the lecture. The lecture went down great. And I remember the brother Ibrahim, who's the ISAC president at the time, he was like, oh, this guy's really good. And he was like, you just told me about him, because I knew Ibrahim from Fausis, I think. He was like, oh, you just reached out to me and told me like he's a speaker, and you know, half the speakers that you guys invite, I don't really know, but they all look like they're really good. So if you have more events in the future, then feel free to come back to Kingston. So we've been back to Kingston a few times.
That's cool.
I always like Kingston. It's in a really posh part of London. And then we were obviously leaving, and we went out to eat with them. And it was the first time I'd been introduced to the concept of frozen yogurt. or as Americans call it, it's almost called
Froyo.
frozen
Yeah.
yogurt.
Yeah,
Frozen yogurt.
frozen yogurt. What are you saying?
Sorry,
Have some class, man.
frozen yogurt.
I still haven't had that. How does that taste like? Is it
Frozen
just
yogurt.
ice cream.
Yeah, so it's basically that's what Omar was saying. He was like in the US.
Yeah.
So we went out to have a meal and stuff. They took us to a place in Kingston, and then there was an ice cream place that we walked past. And Omar was like, "Oh, I'm really craving frozen yogurt." And I was like, "What the hell is frozen?" Because I don't like yogurt, like dahi or whatever, people call it in our language, or I don't know what they call it in your language, but
Danone.
just call it like the brand name. It's like Hoover is like your vacuum, right, for life. And Umar was like, "I don't really want ice cream, I want frozen yogurt." I was like, "What the hell is frozen yogurt? Like, you buy yogurt and you freeze it? Like, it doesn't make sense." And he was like, "No, in the US, it's like ice cream, but it's a healthier version of ice cream, and you get loads and loads and loads of different flavors. Like, you have shops that just sell multiple flavors of this frozen yogurt, which is an alternative to ice cream." But
to offset what? Like the tremendous amount of sugar that they already have?
probably, it's a balanced diet. That's what it all counts down to, innit? You know what I mean?
That's mad.
So we were going around to places in Kingston. We were saying, "Do you have frozen yogurt?" And they were like, "Yeah, but we have one flavor, which is the frozen yogurt flavor. Like, we don't have multiple flavors of frozen yogurt." And he was like, "Oh, in the US, you have lots of different flavors in the frozen yogurt variety." And everyone was like, "No, we just have frozen yogurt." I think we ended up getting one. So that's the first time I'd ever heard of that thing.
You didn't try it out?
No, because I just assumed it was yogurt that was frozen.
Yeah.
I don't like yogurt.
Yeah.
I was like, why would I eat frozen version of something that I don't like?
I mean, I like yogurt, but just having it frozen, it's just, the concept's strange to me.
He was like, "It's just healthier version of ice cream." I was like, "Bro, you ain't selling me this thing. It ain't working. It's anything that has yogurt in its name. It's like me and mayonnaise. Ain't happening."
Let's not talk about your shortcomings.
Confessing my sins on the podcast. So that was that. And then I said to Omar, because Omar really wanted to see, so the lecture's done. Lecture went well. And Omar, what was interesting actually was so Omar, wherever we were going, he wanted to wear a thobe.
Yeah.
So everywhere we were going, we wanted to wear a thobe. But when we left Birmingham, he forgot the thobe. He forgot the thobe in the thing. And he said, "Oh, you know what? Are they going to react in a different way because I'm not wearing a thobe?" I actually remember this right now, where he was like, I'm just wearing like trousers and like a jumper." And he actually references it in the lecture. If you go back and watch that lecture, he'll talk about, the clothing isn't what makes the person. But in the car, he was like, "Oh man, I really wanted to wear a thobe." But then he was like, "Well, I'll flip it. The fact that I'm not wearing a thobe, I'll address that in the thing and saying a thobe isn't what makes the individual. He just wanted to wear it because it was part of his look and feel, probably what he was comfortable delivering a lecture in." But he was like, "There's nothing wrong in someone speaking about Islam in this uniform that I'm wearing right now, which is just a jumper and trousers." So I remember that, which is always a cool thing. I was like, "Yeah, bro, do you?" Because he asked me for my opinion. Should I? Because obviously he's from abroad. He doesn't know the local culture and how people respond to different things. Yeah. He's only seen what's based on the internet, and the sect wars.
Obviously, if he never wore a thobe, they're gonna think of him as like a Western secular type of Islamic scholar.
Do you get me? So he wasn't, and he was like, "Is it okay?" I was like, "Yeah." And so I was assuring him, I was like, "It's perfectly fine for you to not wear it. It's not like you're the first person in the UK, but obviously first time here, he doesn't know." So he was like, "Okay, I'll flip it. I'll put that into my lecture." And then I remember when we were leaving, I said to him, "Look, I know you really," because he obviously is coming from the States. He doesn't know when he's going to come back to the UK. Yeah. And I said, "Look, why don't we go have a look at the places that you wanted to see this morning?" So, Buckingham Palace, Big Ben, these kind of places. Why don't we go see them? And he was like, no, it's, it's late enough already. It was like 10, 11 or whatever it was. He was like, "No, forget that. You have to get back to Birmingham." And I was like, "Listen, dude, you're going all the way back to America. That's like a 16-hour round trip if you ever want to come back to see Big Ben. This is, for me, is like an extra 2 hours tonight. I'd much rather the 2 hours of my get wasted than you having to do 16 hours just to come back to look at these landmarks." He's like, "Are you sure?" I was like, "Yeah. Like, even if we went back to Birmingham, I had to come back to see these things. That's a trek. We're here already in London. Let's go have a look at them." And Ibrahim was like, "Oh, if you guys are going that way, then what if I jump in the car? Because I'm going that way. My house is that way. And you can drop me off on the way." I was like, "Okay," me being polite guy, a miskin one. So I was like, "All right, jump in." And he was a nice enough guy. Ibrahim was a very nice guy, actually. So I was like, "Jump in." And Ibrahim turned out to be like London historian extraordinaire. So we're driving around the streets, and he's like, "So this building was made in 18 something,
on the voice and everything."
Yeah. Like he's a Somali guy who was like the poshest Somali guy you've ever met. Bash used to.
I know Ibrahim.
Yes. Bash used to say that, right? When people were like, "Who's Ibrahim?" and people would try to describe him, and Bash would just be like, "He's Somali, but he sounds English." And everyone was like, "Oh, Ibrahim, yeah." So he had that voice, right? So he was like. And this road, as you can see, this building, what you might not have known was it was owned by this person. And like, first of all, the first 2-3 times he's doing it, I'm like, oh, that's kind of cool. And then I was like, yo, Ibrahim, how do you know all this stuff? And he was like, so I studied this at universities, and he knew like loads about. So it ended up being like really good. And he was also with us when we went to the hospital, and he was helpful from that perspective. He was like,
he just knows things.
Just knows things. So we were driving around. And it's London in the middle of the night. And I was doing dumb stuff. Like, what's the bridge next to Big Ben? Is it Westminster Bridge?
I don't know. Either that or Tower Bridge.
One of those bridges, right? So like, I just stopped my car on the bridge. And I was like, yeah, Omar and Ibrahim, you two jump out. Omar, you get a picture in front of Big Ben. And Ibrahim, you take the picture of him for him. And we'll just start driving and we'll just carry on. So I'm doing all this kind of stuff. And then we drove to Buckingham Palace. Because we put it into the sat-nav, where's Buckingham Palace? And Buckingham Palace is like a semicircle outside of the front where they have like the little flowers, the area where they also have the guards, the ones who stand in front of the place. So I saw the semicircle, and there's like little cordoned off ropes, I guess. But there's like a massive gap in the middle. And I was like, oh, the massive gap must be for cars to go through. So we're going around the circle of Buckingham Palace. I saw the gap, and I went into the gap, and all you heard was beep, loads of cars behind me, like, what are you doing, you nutter? You're not supposed to go in there. I didn't know anything different. So we drove right up to the gates of Buckingham Palace. So me, Ibrahim, Omar, all got out of the car. As soon as we got out of the car, we closed the doors, and all we heard was, oi, what are you doing? And all three of us, without looking at each other, turned around and got straight back in the car and drove off. Like, we drove up to the... Can you imagine that?
Why would you do that?
Because I didn't know how things...
I mean, Ibrahim should have known.
Probably, right? Ibrahim, that's on you, bro. But, I was just like, well, maybe you can drive up to the gates of Buckingham Palace, and then you can look and you take pictures there. Because I'd been to Washington, D.C. And in Washington, D.C., outside the White House, there's times that you can go up to the gates. You could take pictures from the gates. And I was like, well, they must allow you to go to the gates, because why? And it was a massive gap. It wasn't like the Nechel's gap.
Different.
So we drove in, and literally without anyone hearing, we didn't even look at each other. We just turned around and sat back in the car and just drove off. It was so funny.
Shoot you.
But you imagine that, right? Like, there's me, a Pakistani kid, Omar, an Arab guy, Ibrahim, a Somali guy, and all three of us just jump out of the car, roll up to the gates of Buckingham Palace in a little Vauxhall Corsa. That's gonna be trouble. So that was just hilarious. And we did a couple of other little bits and pieces on while we were driving around London. But yeah, because I don't like London, I don't spend a lot of time in London. So I didn't know the protocols and stuff. But that day we did so many things, man. Looking back on it, we sat in the traffic for like an hour and 45 minutes going to London. Then we prayed Dhuhr and Asr in the service station. We did the lecture. We went out and found frozen yogurt. And then we drove around Big Ben and took pictures. And I just parked on the bridge, and they got out. And then we rolled up to the gates of Buckingham Palace. And that was all before like midnight. And then we got back to Birmingham. And Birmingham was Birmingham. Do you know what I mean? We still had that journey to do. So that was a really funny thing looking back on it now.
Did you have fun?
Lots of fun, man. Me and Omar got really, really good. Because he's a wrestling fan as well.
Yeah.
So me and him, he was a wrestling fan as well. So me and him were just talking about wrestling, and
that's rare.
Yeah. Kamal Al-Makki is like proper, high level wrestling fan. But Omar was into it quite a bit. And, we were, like I said, we were relatively similar ages. So we had very similar sense of humor. We got really close to each other on the tour. We cracked a lot of jokes with each other. Of course, you'd have the big spiritual discussions and stuff. But it was just, we had a lot of fun, man. I had a lot of fun anyway. Maybe he was still seething after the first day of what are these sectarian questions.
He just want to get on the bad side of you.
Just let me go, man. Just let me go.
Yeah. Then we move on to the last day of the tour, where you had two events, starting off with the Friday Jum'ah and the lecture afterwards titled Role Models. How did that lecture go? And was that day as intense as the previous?
So we spent basically the entire day at Birmingham University.
Yeah.
And what Umar loved about this day was, before we were going to Sheffield and coming back to Birmingham, we're going to London and coming back to Birmingham. This time he was like, yes, we're going from the hotel like 5 minutes down the road and then we're coming back. So he really enjoyed the fact that it was a relatively short day. But I remember because it was Friday and both were at Birmingham University, the first one was the Jummah khutbah. And I remember when we got into the khutbah, he was like, because the Jummah khutbah, like I would always say to a speaker, speak on whatever you want to speak about.
Yeah, of course.
It's one of those things. It's not advertised. We are going to record it, but just whatever you feel like talking about. So we got Umar and Umar was like, while we were, you've been in St. Francis Hall at Birmingham University. You've been there, right?
Yeah, but I don't know the names.
No, but you know the Jummah khutbah hall, right?
Is it the little? No, I don't know though.
With the big curtains, man. The big room with the big curtains.
It's a church.
Church.
That's the one. Yeah, I know that.
Yeah.
I know that one.
So while we're waiting for the room to fill up, Umar's like, "What do you want me to speak about?" I was like, "Whatever." He was like, "No, give me a topic." So I gave him a topic, and he was like, "Yeah, I'm not really feeling that one." I was like, "So why did you ask me? Like, if you're going to turn around and be like, I don't really like that, I don't really like that topic." I was like, "Just do whatever." And he was like, "Okay." And on the spot, dude, he came up with the entire like lecture on the spot. He was like, "Yeah, I don't really like that topic. Yeah, I did that one the other day. I'm just going to come up with something." And he did an entire Jummah khutbah off of just whatever he felt like speaking of. And it's a pretty decent Jummah khutbah, man, if you go back and listen to it. But I just remember I was sitting in the audience recording and he would just keep looking at me like every few minutes, maybe like every 5-6 minutes, whatever. He would just look at me and just stare at me. And I'm just thinking, why is he staring at me? Like, why is he looking at me? And I was just giving him a blank reaction. I just thought sometimes what happens is as a speaker, you look for someone who's familiar in the audience. So you just focus on them. Because if everyone else, you don't know who they are, it's just easier to focus on a familiar face. So I thought maybe that's what he's doing. And he came to me afterwards and he goes, "Oh, I was looking at you for help." I'm like, "What help were you looking for?" He said, "I didn't understand because when I was talking, some people had blank looks on their faces. And I was wondering whether I was saying words that you guys don't say in England." I'm like, "What are you on about?" He was like, "Oh, I was wondering whether I'm using too many colloquially American phrases and words and people here just have no clue what I'm talking about because people just look lost." I'm like, "Dude, we speak English." You speak English. Like, there's not going to be that much. Like, what word was it that you thought that you said that? And it was like some random ones, like, let's say, for example, he might have said, "I hit it out the park." I'm like, "Yeah, we get that. It's not like that difficult of a phrase, right?" So it was lots of stuff like that. He was like, "Oh, I said this is," I'm like, "Yes, because that's normal English, bro. Like, I don't know where you think we are." But it was just funny how he kept looking at me for like guidance and help. And he was like, you just let me down, bro. I was just looking at you and you gave me a blank look.
Gave me no help.
Gave me no help. And so I remember that from that particular event. And then we did the Friday one in the evening. Again, the Friday one went quite well. The role models one, this was a lecture that he delivered at the University of Birmingham. That was just, like I said, nothing noteworthy about the lecture. It was just the last one from the event. Nice lecture. You can watch that as well on YouTube. I think it's a very well watched lecture on YouTube. Again, the lighting in the room was terrible. It was in the Guild Council chamber. You know, the room that's next to the prayer room?
Yeah.
The woodeny kind of one. But it was like at that time of the year, Maghrib and Isha was like much earlier. So when we were having a lecture at 6, it's pitch black and the lighting was terrible. So it probably doesn't look as visually as appealing as the lecture.
Maybe you should bring lights with you.
Well, since then, lighting on cameras has gotten a lot better.
Yeah.
So, the modes and dark mode and, the lenses and stuff, they look a lot better now. So we're talking about 2012.
It's not that far back. DSLRs were still
That's what I mean, but like, there was two things. I mean, speaking about DSLRs, that was a tour where we also had a lot of professional photos taken. But it was a brother who volunteered. He was a Malaysian brother. Now, I don't know if you know much about Malaysians who come to the UK when they come to study. Okay, fair enough. I'll fill you in. A lot of them have SLRs for whatever reason. I think in Malaysia, they're very cheap to buy.
Oh, is it, racist stereotype that they are?
Not legit, though. on a level.
Yeah.
Like, a lot of Malaysians, so I'd go to different unis and I realized very quickly, like, every ISOC had really good pictures.
Yeah.
They were all done by, like, Malaysian people.
Yeah.
So I found a friend of mine. I was like, why do Malaysians all have, it's a bit of a stereotype, like you said, but I said that to him. I said, like, look, it's a bit out there to say this, but how come you've all got like really good cameras? And he goes, oh, basically they're really cheap, and we get like grants and stuff to get them, and it's like a little hobby that a lot of people there. It's like a cultural thing. Like people like really like take pictures. So I found out there was an event for FOSIS, and there was a brother who took pictures who was studying at Loughborough Uni. His name was Zain. He was from Malaysia. And I asked the FOSIS guy, like, oh, who took the pictures? And he goes, this brother from here. So I reached out to him. I said, oh, Zain, would you mind coming on a few of the days on the tour and coming and taking pictures? So he went to the Sheffield event. He came to the Wolverhampton event. And he came to the Birmingham event. And I remember at the end of the Birmingham event, we used to have calendars. Do you remember the calendars that we sell at events to raise a bit of funds to go towards activities? And that was the first one where I got the speaker, who was Umar. I said, listen, can you go through the calendar, see which month you like the graphic best of, and like pose with it. So we went to some random corridor in Birmingham Uni, and like he's modeling it away with the thing, putting it next to him, above him, to the side of him, in front of him, like in front of the camera, just messing around with it. And we took like lots of these really funny pictures. But then the one that you see is just like him holding the calendar, really nice and very formally smiling. It's actually a really nice picture. I've seen a lot of Muslim organizations obviously snip out the calendar part, take his head as a headshot, and use that on their poster, because it's a really nice picture of him where he's just smiling and looks really, it's a very nice shot of him. So Zain joined us on the tour, and he took all the pictures for us, and that was important because it's always nice from that perspective to have, pictures that you look at that look really good but remind you of certain, parts of the tour, like, oh, remember that day, and remember that, and remember how we were messing around there, we were doing this, that, and the other. And so that was cool. I remember after the event, because Sheikh Zahir from our Sufa Institute, he said, so I reached out to him because a lot of the times when I bring people over, I'll reach out to him, or he would reach out to me first. And I said, look, I've got this young speaker coming over. His name's Omar Suleiman. Do you want to meet him? And Sheikh Zahir at the time didn't know who he was. He was like, okay, I guess, bring him down to our place and we'll put some food on for him, and we'll be hospitable and stuff. And while we went down, while we're talking, Sheikh Zahir's like, I know you. I saw a video of you. Did you do this lecture and stuff? And Umar's like, yeah, that was me. And he was like, yeah, you know what? Rehan was describing to you before, but now that you're talking to him, you're telling me where you're from and your background and stuff. Now I can remember I've seen you before. And then like them two, and they got on really well and they were talking about it. But what was awkward, man, because Sheikh Zahir didn't really know him at the beginning when we first got in. Like he didn't recognize him. He didn't make that connection. And Umar knew who Sheikh Zahir was, but he didn't know how he was. He's just seen like lots of YouTube videos of him. So, the standard chit chat at the beginning, Sheikh Zahir's like, so how's your trip been to the UK so far? He's like, well, Rehan over here, he turned up like 45 minutes late and I didn't have any way to contact him. Like he was doing it like, like a jokey way of like introducing it. But like he said it so much, I was like, yo, I think Sheikh Zahir's taking this serious, like he thinks that there might be some beef here between us. And the Sheikh Zahir's like, Rehan, why would you do that to him? I mean, why would you invite somebody from the US? I'm like, whoa, it didn't get that deep. So I kind of got sold down the river there a little bit, but I think both of them took it in jest and in humor, just, like connecting on that level, but they were connecting at my expense. So I always was like, man, I can't make me look a little bit bad.
Let me tell you how big of a flop Rehan is.
Yeah, exactly. That's pretty much. Yeah. And the Sheikh Zahir was probably like, yeah, he's done that to other people, adding that in.
This is a pattern. What is happening?
Well, and Sheikh Zahir just looked at me like, why would you do that to somebody you've invited him? I was like, whoa. It's not my fault that there was 4 car crashes on the way. And then he's telling us about, telling Sheikh Zahir about, we rolled up to the gates of Buckingham Palace and security was shouting at us like, oh, what are you doing? I was like, man, and he was like, he's got a tiny car. I was like, oh no, this is sounding so bad. But yeah, it was just all a bit of banter and a bit of fun.
Is that why you got a better car now?
Yeah, just
because now you have tons of leg space.
Yeah. That's some of that Arab money came in after. That's what got that. But so yeah, I mean, it was good banter. We had a good laugh, and we stayed awake maybe till like 1 a.m. And that was the last lecture of the tour.
The last day.
Last
any
day.
Confetti.
No, we didn't have a going away party. We didn't cut cake. It was just that was the last lecture.
How was the journey back to the airport? Did you was you late this time picking him up?
No.
How many car crashes was it back to the hotel?
Dude, on a level, it almost got serious on the way back.
Oh, okay. Wow.
So we stayed awake till like 1 a.m. and his flight was leaving about 7 a.m. again.
Yeah.
So you need to get to the airport in Heathrow like 3 hours early. So I said, look, if we check in online, probably need to do 2 hours early.
Yeah.
So we can get like a couple of hours sleep in. So I was saying to Omar, we can get a couple of hours sleep. Then I'll pick you up and I'll drive you. And Omar was like, listen, it's 1 a.m. We're going to basically have to set off at 4 a.m. Are you going to be okay to do that journey? I was like, yeah, I do this all the time. And it's true. I always do those long journeys. And, you know, me and you were speaking about like how much I drive around and I know roads and stuff because I've done them so much. So I was like, yeah, I do this all the time. So we're driving on the motorway and Umar was like, listen, I'm really tired. Do you mind if I go to sleep? And I was like, dude, knock out. Go for it. He's like, are you sure you're not going to fall asleep, are you? I'm like, dude, come on, man. This is Rayhan you're talking about. Yeah. I ain't going to fall asleep.
Big man.
Yeah. Big man, you get me? I've done this before. This ain't my first rodeo. Yeah. I'll stay awake. He's like, are you sure? Because I need to knock out because I'm really tired. I was like, yeah, go to sleep. Don't worry about it. And he goes, okay. So we're driving along. And the next thing I recall is I felt this. Felt a hand on my shoulder. And it's almost hand on my shoulder. And I just looked at him and I knew what happened. I was like, did I go to sleep? And he goes, yeah. And I said to him, what happened? And he goes, I kind of was looking at the corner of my eye. And he goes, your head dropped. And when your head dropped, I knew that you'd fallen asleep behind the wheel of the car. And he goes, that's when he put his hand on my shoulder to kind of like wake me up.
What's wrong with you, man?
So at that point, then the adrenaline kicked in.
Yeah.
And then I was like, oh man, you know, you woke me up and that's good, man. Now I'm wide awake. And he was like, are you sure you'll be fine for the rest of the journey? I was like, yeah, now that you've woke me up, I needed that jolt. And I was like, now you can go to sleep. I think he was probably like looking out. He went to sleep. But I think for the first like 15, 20 minutes, he was looking out the corner of his eye, just make sure I was going to sleep. And we ended up getting there. Like I said, I stayed awake all the way after that. And the irony is, like, I was shattered. So my plan was that I would drive him to Heathrow, then go to my sister's house and sleep there.
Yeah.
But once he, you know, tapped my shoulder and woke me up, and I had the adrenaline going, and then of course the sun raises at 7 a.m. So you had all the light coming in. I drove all the way back to Birmingham wide awake. Again, you know how we were talking about Umar at Wolverhampton University? He was really tired. Once he did the lecture, he was wide awake.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, like, even though I'd only had like 2 hours sleep, I was ready. I could have gone the entire day again.
So, I get you.
So the plan was I would drop him off to the airport and then drive to my sister's. But I was just like, yeah, I can do Birmingham. So I drove all the way back to Birmingham. And luckily, it was on a Saturday. But that was one of the rare times in my life where I wasn't working on a Saturday. So I actually did get the Saturday as a rest day, just because I knew his flight was in the morning. So I just thought, I'm not going to be able to make work if I'm dropping him off. So I remember in the airport, we hugged and he was like, thank you for everything. I was like, look, apologize again for picking you up late and almost killing you by falling asleep behind the wheel. Like, it could have happened, man. And that's one of the things that a lot of people don't realize is, and I know, you know, there's, on a serious note, there's a couple of brothers who I know who are doing Islamic work for charities and so on, who have actually passed away driving on the motorway. Only recently in the past year, there's a brother who's, I think, staff for Islamic Relief, and he was driving on the motorway. Now, I don't know if he passed away or he crashed into somebody, but I know people who have, you know, really injured themselves really badly doing those types of journeys. And that's just because the nature of things, like there wasn't anyone else who would have been willing to take Umar at 4 a.m. to, you know, get to the airport in Heathrow so that I could have had that rest and that sleep. And secondly, because we only went to meet Shaykh here for like a short while, because we were having so much fun and so much banter, we just lost track of time. And because we lost track of time, before you know it, it's like 1 a.m. and we're like, oh, we need to go soon because, you know, we've got this long journey ahead of us. So sometimes the best of intentions just leads to a situation that you really don't want to put yourself in. So if you're ever in that situation where, you know, you know you're going to be potentially very tired, try to mitigate that. Try to change things around so you don't have to make that journey. You know, really what I should have done was cancel that meeting with Shaykh Zahir and say, listen, Shaykh, actually we need some rest. We had a lot of fun. It was good banter and all that kind of stuff, but really we should have done that. So if in the future, you know, you tried to squeeze things in at the expense of rest time, and that's potentially dangerous, don't do that. For advice for people. And secondly, if you can't find someone else who'll do the drive with you, try to take someone with you along the way. You know, if the speaker, the artist wants to sleep, there's somebody else in the car who's keep you awake, who's talking to you. You know, there's been another time, very many years later, when Baba Ali, we were doing a Strangers tour again, and I was absolutely shattered. And Ali did not realize, and I told him afterwards, he basically spoke to me non-stop from the venue to the hotel. And it wasn't like he wasn't talking to me to keep me awake. He was just talking about random stuff and the stuff that he was doing. But because he was talking to me, my mind was engaging. I was staying awake. And as soon as we pulled up, I said, "Bro, I'm so glad you talked to me," because I was about to knock out behind the wheel. And Ali just turned around to like the guys and was like, "What? This guy's telling us this now?" And I was like, "Seriously, man." I was just really pleased that you kept talking, because I was hoping that, you know, if everyone went to sleep, like I was going to say, "Look, can someone stay awake?" But the fact that you stayed awake and talked.
At this point, don't you have like techniques to keep you awake?
Now I do.
Like, what's your technique?
Now I do. So now what I do is I listen to podcasts.
Yeah.
And because my car connects to Bluetooth, I'll put podcast on my phone, connected to the Bluetooth, and then that's almost like someone talking to you.
Yeah.
So your mind engages and it kind of stays in tune that way. And again, I'll always make sure. Generally, if we have like a big tour where I know I'm going to be stretched, I'll get a driver,
like a second guy.
Like a person whose just sole job is to drive the car.
Oh, that's cool.
So I can then rest, and his job is you just need to be awake for the driving missions. You know, during the event, because I have to be awake during the events, don't forget, because I'm doing the presentation, I'm doing the liaising, I know all the parties involved, I know what needs to be done and what doesn't need to be done. Driver doesn't need that. Driver in the middle of the event can just be like, "Listen, bro, I'll watch the video afterwards on YouTube. I'm going to knock out for like 2 hours while this thing is going on." So I try to do those two particular things. Try to get a driver first and foremost. If I can't, put a podcast on. Thirdly, if you can't do either of those, then just tell the person to speak to you. I could have been the guy who killed Omar Suleiman. Luckily, he woke up and was watching me.
You know, the Islamic community would have killed you for that.
Probably. Oh, we probably would have both been in the ditch.
Death.
Yeah. So you know, that's the way it was.
That was a good wrap up. I mean, alhamdulillah, he went back in one piece. Do you still keep in contact with him after stressing him out?
I mean, he closed his personal page on Facebook.
Yeah.
So I've still got his email. I message him every once in a while. But when he comes to the UK, if he comes to Birmingham especially, I'll go out my way to go meet him.
Yeah.
And I'll try to connect with him when I can. But it's like, me and you were talking about this yesterday. Look how many things I'm doing in my life. And I'm nowhere near as famous and popular as he is. So you can imagine all the other things that he's doing with his life. You got two people with very, very busy schedules. It's not, you know, we can't speak every day. You know, I remember he put a picture up on his Facebook about him meeting Hulk Hogan on an aeroplane, and I WhatsApped him straight away. You know, because we'd both spoke so much about wrestling on the road. I was like, "Did you know, Hulk up on him? Did you say to him, 'What you gonna do, brother?'" Yeah. And he just LOL'd me back.
That's
so
funny.
You know, we communicate, we link up, and we do. He's you know, genuinely, like, the persona that Al Maghrib kind of portray of him is a gentle giant, and he genuinely is.
It seems that way.
He's a very, very smart guy, and that's, you know, a lot of people, when they see Muslim scholars who are popular and famous, they degrade him a little bit. They're like, "Oh, the only reason that they're a scholar is because they can't make it in, you know, the normal space. They can't do a 9 to 5." Well, these guys are highly, highly intelligent.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, they probably have a greater IQ than you do. And that's the reason why they're able to connect with so many. It's not everyone who's an Islamic speaker has millions of followers online. There's a reason why they have millions of followers. So this dude is hyper smart. And I think a lot of people are doing injustice there, where they're like, just assume, "Oh, he must be a sheikh because he was not very smart." It's like, no, he was very smart. You know, he was very smart. He was a very nice guy. And you know, there's certain people that I see their online persona still, and I'm like, yeah, he's just being himself. He's a nice guy. He's just being a nice guy. You know, Mufti Menko's that, Omar Suleiman is that. And when people see him online and he's doing all this kind of stuff, I always felt, you know, I know a lot of people, you know, some people have short tempers, you know, sheikhs, artists, whatever. Some people have short tempers. Some people, you know, will have little quirks about them where you're just like, okay, I can see the red mist kind of, you know, takes over every once in a while. But with Umar, I was like, he's just a nice guy. He's a genuinely nice guy. We spoke about a lot of stuff. Like I said, we were relatively the same age. So we had a lot of things in common. You know, his daughter, I think, at the time, you know, he really madly loves his daughter. And I didn't think he had a son at that stage. I think his son is as old as my oldest son. and I think he's got a daughter who's a couple of years older. So all that stuff that you see of him online, and everyone sees all the stuff he's involved in. Genuinely, from what I've been able to, and I think I'm a fairly good judge of character. I've always felt, Umar's a good dude.
He's a good dude, and just researching up on him a little bit, he actually didn't get denied entry to the UK. I was all wrong. I just checked.
Of course, you're wrong. I like the way that you didn't take my word for it, despite the fact I knew he had never been.
But the Wikipedia is dodgy anyways, because it's saying his date of birth is either 86 or 87. So
that's why I said he's relatively close to my age, right? Yeah. Oh, that's the picture?
Is that the picture?
That's the picture from the tour, yeah. So there you go, the Wikipedia picture of Shaykh Omar Suleiman. That's the one.
Picture for the podcast thumbnail.
So so what you don't see, what someone's cropped out, is he's holding the Like Media calendar just below. And so it's, like I said, it's a good picture, isn't it?
Yeah, it is a good picture.
It's a good picture. So, but before this, like, he was getting the calendar and putting it over here and putting it up on that side of his face and just like pulling faces, and we're just having a lot of fun. We have a picture of me, him, Zayn, and Adil. Adil kind of came on the last day.
The sociable buffer.
Adil came because I just knew, like, all right, I was 40 minutes late on the first day. Let's get Adil in to smooth things over. Mm-hmm. So we've got a picture of all of us together. We did one of those. We had the camera on timer.
Look at this, Sheikhpedia.
Sheikhpedia. That's the thing. Damn, there you go.
Okay.
Well, that's what we're good at, Muslims, man. We'll go find ideas from somebody else and just remix it into our own thing.
That's all.
So okay, maybe it wasn't the picture of Wikipedia. It was a picture of Sheikhpedia.
Oh my days! Look at this.
Alive, currently president. It says his residence is Malaysia. I don't think it's Malaysia. I'm pretty sure he's still in the US. Maybe some Malaysian guy just went in and hacked it.
See, now Sheikhpedia you questioning the validity of Sheikhpedia.
Yeah, sorry, Sheikhpedia.
Yeah,
but yeah, so that's if everyone goes to Sheikhpedia and sees the picture of Umar, that's from a Like Media photo, and that kind of stuff I like.
Yeah.
And if we've taken a picture of relatively high quality, it looks good. I am perfectly fine with people using that picture. What annoys me sometimes, you see a Muslim scholar, and the picture that people use to advertise and promote them on posters, on marketing material, it's like really bad, really pixelated, or they're not looking properly, or just not good quality. Listen, if you ever see a Like Media image that you like and you want to use it for promotional purposes, feel free, take it, use it. That's what we created it for. We ain't gonna
Do you archive your media?
It's on the website. So if someone goes on the website, every single tour that we have, you'll see the individual videos from each one. You'll see the photos that we've got from each one, and you'll see like what we wrote, the blurb, the description that we would write to accompany each particular event. So like I said, just go online, take the pictures, use it. I ain't going to take it to the grave with me. If it benefits somebody, just remember on the day of judgment, I'm going to be standing there at the back of my hand up saying, I want some good deeds, for anyone who came because they liked the poster or the picture that was used. But that was the tour of Umar. I really liked Umar. After this tour, because he lined up with Al Maghrib.
Yeah.
And like I said, super smart guy, super knowledgeable, super good dude. It was only a matter of time before everyone knew who he was. And he shortly after became, in that bracket of Numan Ali Khan and Mufti Menk.
Yeah.
Guys that everyone in the Western world, Islamic Western world, was just like, I love listening to this guy.
Yeah.
And all the power to him, and much love always have had for him.
Yeah, mashallah. That's a hectic episode. A lot of things happened. You need to learn how to accommodate foreign guests a bit more. But yeah, that's
harsh. That is like 10 tours in. One time we were late. You're like, you need to fix up,
bro, because he came all the way from the US with his tall body, and then you didn't accommodate him. Next time, get a minivan.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's all for this episode. Next time, we'll be discussing the tour that you had with James Yusuf Yee, and a former Muslim chaplain, who is a former Muslim chaplain at Guantanamo Bay, and Mozambique, I remember as well.
Yes. Yeah. But the tour was with Yusuf Yee, and we had Mozambique on one of the events, but we'll cover that.
Okay. Stay tuned for that, and yeah, it should be interesting to hear. But until then, Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
Bye.
Keep the faith.